Hi, I'm Garm and this is Creator Corner. I'm here today with Wes Ascolese. How's it going?
Oh, it's going, Garm. Surviving the summer here down in Texas.
Yeah, same here, although mine is somewhat more mild.
Yeah, just a tad.
Uh, so we've talked before. You were on for the cool crowdfunding episode for Beyond Deep. Uh,
Mhm.
how did you get into the tabletop? Like, how'd you get into tabletop gaming, and then I guess later the industry?
So, tabletop gaming started when I was probably 12 or 13. So, we're talking 20 years ago now. I just turned 33 on the 17th. Um, of June, whenever this airs. So, uh,
Happy
uh,
birthday!
thank you. Appreciate it. Um, yeah, I mean, it started off reading D&D third edition, some Vampire the Masquerade, some Werewolf. um it was a lot of, so I'm from the heyday of like 3D video games becoming really mainstream. So TTRPGs really fell by the wayside because in the 80s, like, video games were very important, but like there's only so much you can do with the technology at the time. In the 90s, all that stuff gets like digitized and created into um, video game RPGs and MMOs and stuff like that. So a lot of it was just like reading and absorbing what I could. I think we tried to play a couple times. I probably got a dozen sessions in between um, 12 and 18. So, um, more than your average person, but significantly less than anyone playing tabletop RPGs. That being said, when I got to college, fifth edition D&D was in its playtest phase. I played a lot of that, and then whenever it came out, I think I skipped a year or so, and then I just got super into it. That's kind of the boring TTRPG history of me, but then there is the last year and a half to 2 years where I've just gone completely off the deep end and absorbed as many RPGs as I can. Um, it started with my co-writer, Chris Koger, and actually this is probably 4 or 5 years ago now, but my obsession didn't start until recently. Um, he introduced me to several one-page RPGs, Trashkin being one of them. That was awesome. Ghost Lines, shout out to that one. Ghostbusters, but steampunk.
Yeah, that one's
Um,
wild.
it's yeah. I wish it was more than one page.
Me too.
The
Yeah.
fact that that is one page is wild. Um, and then where it really took off was I was introduced to Powered by the Apocalypse games via the Sprawl, which is a cyberpunk hack
Hell
of
yeah.
yeah, it's very good. Um, Also started my, I mean, I've always been left leaning politically, but when you start to play a cyberpunk game, you're like, maybe blowing up the corporations is the correct option. Um, so it definitely began my radical shift into now I'm an insufferable leftist. Like most people have a hard time talking to me, and that's fine. That's how I want it to be. Um, but yeah, so the Sprawl was sort of my big uh, intro into games that were not D&D. And then the final evolution of that is we're coming up almost on a year ago now of Beyond Deep. Um, Actually, it's probably been a year since I started the project. We funded in August of last year. Um, and that has taken me deep into the indie scene. I mean, I'm picking up other RPGs too that aren't quite indie. I just picked up City of Mist, actually, which I'm quite interested in. Um, but yeah, seeing what a zine could be, specifically the Fear through Morkborg. That's a really high quality zine, but it's got that feel of punk zines from the 80s and stuff like that. Of almost looks photocopied, and that was actually the initial plan for Beyond Deep, but it kind of grew out of control. But yeah, that's my very long and sordid past of TTRPGs and how I got into eventually writing them.
Nice. This brawl kicks so much ass, man.
Yeah, it's very good.
Hey, every time somebody asks me what my best DMing experience is, it's the Sprawl. Like it's the one time everything's just like flowed. I have no anxiety about what I'm doing. I'm just like throwing cyberpunk obstacles at my horrible players.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the nice thing about PBTA games in general is that the prep is really low, and then if you are into the genre of it, it's even easier. One game that I really like right now is Monty Cook Games' Stealing Stories for the Devil. It's specifically heists, but it is weird heists. Basically, it's Leverage. I don't know if you're familiar with Leverage, but where they do all so they do all the flashbacks and nonsense, and it's like competency porn and stuff like that. But take Leverage, and all of the people have actual supernatural powers and can either control time, control people's minds, or control like manifest objects or demanifest objects. And it's pretty rad. It is a truly zero prep game because you I mean, I guess if you want to print out a map, you can, but the deluxe edition comes with like 20 maps, so you're probably fine. But if you want to print out some blueprints and make it, extra cool, sure. But it is fascinating.
Competency porn, that is a wonderful term.
Yeah. It comes from, I mean, I'm sure it's a trope somewhere that I learned. But my first love of it was Burn Notice, the show, because like that's all that show is spies doing cool stuff.
Hell yeah.
Blowing up things.
Yeah, Buddy and I, we used to watch like Burn Notice and Leverage together a lot,
Yeah,
so I'm familiar.
Yeah.
You ever played the official Leverage TTRPG?
I have not, unfortunately. I have played. So it's based on it's one of the first Cortex games. I have played several Cortex Prime games, which actually the only official Cortex Prime game that exists currently is Tales of Xadia, the Dragon Prince TTRPG. But I think Cortex is a really cool system, and I'm sad there aren't more books for it, and I might write something for it eventually.
Hell yeah. I've actually got Smallville back there, the little red with the yellow.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also excellent.
Deeply bizarre. Probably wouldn't run it, but it's a fun read.
Yeah, like so it's less bizarre than you think. Like it's definitely one of those. Cortex does not make a lot of sense like mechanically until you do it, and then it becomes so fluid that it almost doesn't feel like a game. I attribute it sort of like I call it fate with like better dice mechanics, because it's the same sort of thing. You're just talking about what you're doing. You hope you can do it. We only roll when it's narratively interesting, and otherwise we're telling a story.
Yeah.
So,
and like Cortex, was that Cortex Plus? I think is Smallville. Yeah, it's so
Correct.
weirdly malleable with like with like their hackers guide where you can change up like what you're using as the core attributes. Like Smallville is various values and stuff.
Yeah, and so they did that even more in Cortex Prime, which is the current one. And they're like, you can use all of these modules or none of these modules, and it will be a completely different game, yet somehow still make sense because it doesn't really add any different, like, at least not vastly different mechanics. They're all fairly similar to the dice pool building, and therefore really easy to sort of pick up.
Right. Yeah, it just adds more variation, or different focuses, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
more than
Mm-hmm.
complexity.
Mm-hmm.
What's your dog's name?
Oh, that's Beauty. She is, I think she turns 12 this year. Some random Staffordshire bully mix of some sort.
It's a very appropriate name.
Yeah, she's great. And now she's pretzeling herself all over my bed.
The dream.
Yep.
Yeah, you can just barely see my cat Cannon, little hump right there.
Cannon.
Yeah.
The dark lump.
Yep, sleeping in her little box there. She's probably got all four
Oh,
paws in one corner.
cute.
Yeah, she's adorable. So, what have you got in the I don't know what the appropriate cooking metaphor is. Frying pan, oven,
Mine's more like a pressure cooker.
pressure cooker.
That,
Yeah.
yeah, that if left too long, will explode. So the last thing I worked on, that is already in production to be released, and I didn't super work on it, but the hard like dynamic, Chris Koger, and mutual friend of ours, Josh, they wrote a cyborg zine called the Hard Light Dynamic. It should be, Pledge Manager should be opening up next 2 weeks or so, and so it'll be available on backer kit for that. And then my next project that will be kickstarted is, it's a bit more ambitious than I would ever do alone, but Jeff Jones, he runs a podcast as well. The name is escaping me currently, but I was on there as well. He did Gary's Appendix.
Oh yeah, I back that.
Yeah, yeah. So him, myself, and Chris Koger, again, he's my ride or die, are sort of working on this big overarching project that has no end in sight, and was sort of nebulous. But then it's basically going to be a semi-annual zine. That's totally hearsay. It could be annually. It could be more than that. But it's going to be for Dungeon Crawl Classics, and eventually it will be this sort of anthology of adventures and creatures and a lore setting, independent of DCC itself. So that's my next one. About halfway through writing that. It's hard to fit an adventure and dungeon in 10,000 words. Just FYI.
Listen,
Beyond Deep.
I
Go
struggle to
ahead.
put out 2,000 words every couple of weeks, so like,
Yeah, you say that, but then you're like, with a story, when you have certain things that you want, you
yeah,
know, I mean, so Beyond Deep was supposed to be, 32 pages. Came out to be 100.
good lord,
Yeah,
that's a bit beyond a zine. Yeah,
yeah, it is a book. And it probably should have been 150, but I crammed a lot in there. So I am going to eventually, perhaps sooner rather than later, because I got in contact with a good editor, I'm going to put out a Frontier Scum version of it. Hopefully it cuts some down, but also I'm going to be adding stuff, so who knows how big it'll be.
well, if you cut stuff out, that just gives you more room to put more stuff in. Yeah,
Exactly. But yeah, no, Beyond Deep definitely should have been like 150 pages to give it more breathing room, but we crammed 15,000 words into and 4 locations and 6 NPCs with double spreads and 6 monsters. No, more than 6 monsters. 8 monsters. 9 monsters? Nice. I don't remember. Anyway,
a quantity of monsters.
A quantity of monsters. I don't know. Buy Beyond Deep and figure it out for yourself. Actually, at this point, if you buy it, I would like you to buy it and play it, but it's definitely not. I've sold all or most of my copies, so they're all out on various platforms and things like that. But yeah, besides that, my next big ambitious project is going to be, or was going to be, Troika. I think I'll still make it Troika to start with, but also I'm in contact with the writer of Grok. Just he's apparently very approachable and like wants you to make cool stuff with his system, because it's got that same sort of Gonzo feel.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, and so with I think a less antiquated system, which I appreciate. But yeah, so let me back up a little bit. This is the year of Dungeon 23. Most everyone has fallen off. I know I'm significantly behind at this point. I do still plan to finish, but my Dungeon 23 was a bit more ambitious than I should have gone, as most people do. But my plan was to make a Troika sphere, which is, for those who don't know, a world within Troika with different rules and creatures and backgrounds, every week. So I would end up with 52 spheres. I've got about 12 written up. I've got about 9 in my journal. But one that really stood out to my friends was called Trashtopia. Trashtopia is, yeah.
That owns, man.
Thanks, man. And then it basically is the elevator pitch in my brain was, what if Mad Max but with trash animals, like with like raccoons and possums and and then it turned into, it's basically like Wall-E, but instead of robots inhabiting the earth, it's trash animals, and there happens to be a Mad Max element as well.
Are they like ripping around on tuned up RC cars, or?
Absolutely.
Nice.
But also I got some weird. One of my personal favorites was the carp men, or eventually they'll be the fish men. But basically, they're a full fish body, but with like human legs kind of bolted onto the sides and human arms as well. No idea why, but I thought that was very Troika-esque. The fan favorite was the cockroach grifter, who like I drew a cockroach in a trench coat. I think it's on my Twitter. It's definitely on my Instagram and definitely on Mastodon, and it's on Twitter. It's got to be on Twitter. Everything is on Twitter. Anyway, yeah, so it kind of took off, and then I was like, all right, well, now I really want to do this. And so I looked up how to submit stuff to Melsonian Council, which is who produces Troika. And it's very, it's like they want no more than a page. Actually, I think it's like a couple of paragraphs, and they want to know what it is you're doing, how you're going to do it, and a sample. And like, I just can't even begin to think about how that would work. So I kind of got freaked out and stopped working on it. But my new plan is to basically finish it out as best I can. I have another editor friend who is willing to edit it for me. Luckily, Troika is super easy to write for in terms of making up backgrounds and stuff, because you kind of just make up all these numbers and it makes sort of sense. You don't have to do a lot of play testing to balance stuff. You just want a good bit of flavor in the books.
Right.
But yeah, that's my next ambitious project. So yeah, Beyond Deep Frontier, Scum Edition, sometime either late this year or early next year. Probably early next year, if I'm being honest. Project Broadsword, which is the secret title of Jeff Jones's project, means nothing. But basically, it's It's basically a heavy metal inspired, like the magazine Heavy Metal inspired DCC adventure anthology.
Yeah.
And then Trashtopia sometime in the future.
Can't
Are
wait
my
till
main
sometime in
three.
the future. That'd be awesome.
I'll make sure. Oh, but yeah, so I'm also gonna try to write it for Grok as well, because I think, like I said, Troika has a special place in my heart. Is like kind of the first weird RPG I picked up. I was just like, what is this nonsense? And then I became obsessed with Dirk, who is the artist on the cover. He does a lot of stuff. He does his Kickstarter was just the beginning of this year, or anyway, Super Blood Harvest is his main one. He also has written Bring Me Her Bones and has worked with Swordfish Island. And he's just this wild, crazy, talented artist that just draws these batshit insane illustrations. I met him once at a convention, and I've been obsessed ever since. And now he's like, "Yeah, I'll draw for Trashtopia," and I'm like, "What is this life I live?"
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, I could just like, I've interviewed Banana Chan like 4 or 5
Yeah.
times. I'm just like,
wild,
nice.
Yeah, super crazy to talk to people who are quite large in the industry. And
sometimes I don't even know like what I'm sending out the interview on. I'm just like, oh, you're a huge deal, actually. Okay, cool.
So that's another like little not sort of creative project, but a Discord that I got in on called the Titterpig Academy, which is all. So this was born out of the OGL debacle, and just everyone, basically all the beggar RPG people who don't play D&D latched onto the OGL debacle to ensnare all these new people. So on TikTok, I found this Discord, and now I am a quote unquote professor there. So I will be teaching games to people who are interested in that.
Nice.
I'm gonna be teaching Broken Tales, which is World Anvil's
right. Yeah.
Kickstarter, which I'm actually excited about. I picked it up at a Half Price Books, which is a used bookstore down here, and just turns out the system's good. Turns out it's neat.
So. Yeah, I've got a few things on my shelf with Half Price Books stickers on them from when I was visiting Cleveland. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Like that's all the Assassin's Creed stuff that's like somewhere behind me. That was from there. Just like, hey, we just got this giant pile of Assassin's Creed Syndicate art books. I'm like, I'll take one of those.
Yes, yeah, it seems good.
Yeah,
it's like, I mean, the Broken Tales. It was clearly someone got their Kickstarter because it was still shrink wrapped and just like gave it to Half Price Books, and I was like, all right, I will take this brand new product for half price. Sure.
Yeah, it happens. I've got a Kickstarter like Cool Mini or Not Zombicide box somewhere back there that's completely unopened.
Incredible.
So I realized that I don't actually have a table in my house big enough to play it, so it's kind of a problem. Nobody wants to play board games on my bed for some reason.
Bunch of weirdos.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, Professor Ascolese, do you have any final words?
Play a bunch of RPGs, and also one major thing that I want to get on my soapbox about is buy RPG books even if you don't have any intention of playing them. They are great reads regardless, and if you have any interest in game design, it behooves you to do so. So support some indie artists and get out there.
Yeah, and like there was a point in my life where I just satisfied the craving by reading like third-party D&D stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know a lot of that.
Yeah. It's more useful than you would think. It also helps like just creatively in like writing, I find.
Yeah,
because the more you read just of anything, the less stream of consciousness your writing becomes, which is a big problem I have. And it makes your information a lot easier to read.
Yeah, and there's a lot of just buck wild stuff out there.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think Grok is just like worth reading, regardless of if you're ever going to play it or not.
Yeah, I gotta pick that up.
Yeah, it's great.
Add it to my pile of vaguely OSR adjacent things that I'll never run. All right. God, your dog is so cute. Sorry.
Yeah, she's great.
Little tail wag there.
Yeah.
I am great.
Yeah.
All right, Wes. It is always nice to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, Garm.
And those of you watching, go buy Beyond Deep. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.